Hello, this is Unit 6 in the Ford Maintenance Training Series on troubleshooting strategy. Now, in this lesson, I'll describe how flow changers can help you localize a malfunction when troubleshooting. Now, what is a flow changer? Why, it's a component which changes or reroutes the flow between system components. A valve is a flow changer because it may direct fluid power to different parts of a circuit, such as to extend or retract a cylinder. A clutch is a flow changer. So is a switch. I'll call anything that changes how energy flows or how a signal flows in a system a flow changer. If a system has one or more flow changers, they may be used to help narrow your list of suspects. I say they may help you because they may not. It depends on whether any of your initial suspects feed a bad output through a flow changer. If they do, flow changers can help. To show you how flow changers can help you localize, let's first look at a very simple example. In an earlier unit, I told you that when you have only one output and it's bad, all components and inputs are suspect. This is a good general rule, but it may not hold up when the system has a flow changer. When you change the flow in this system, there are three possible results. If the output is bad in position 1 and good in position 2, you know that either I1, A, or the flow changer are bad. Your suspect list is shortened from 6 to 3, either I1, A, or the flow changer. You know everything else is good. If the output is good in position 1 and bad in position 2, the only suspects are I2, B, and the flow changer. Now, what do you know if the output remains bad as you move the flow changer? You know the components and inputs upstream of the flow changer are good. In the example, we are left with one downstream component, C, and the flow changer as suspects. Now, let's look at a more complex example and see how the localization procedure discussed earlier fits together with the idea of using flow changers to localize further. Here's a system with a flow changer. Let's first apply a method from Unit 5. First, what components feed only good outputs? C and H. This eliminates C and H from the suspect list. Next, since only one output is bad, look upstream from the bad output to locate the first component that also feeds a good output. Following the upper branch from E, we find B. B is a suspect. The components downstream to the flow changer are also suspects. The downstream components here include the flow changer, FC1, and component E. B, FC1, and E are suspects. Can you see why we include the flow changer on our list of suspects? If FC1 were a directional valve with a blockage in one part, you could get the observed symptoms. If FC1 were an electrical switch with a bad contact at position 1, these are the symptoms you would observe. Now, let's continue upstream to A. If A were bad, could we get this symptom pattern? No. For O1 to be good, the input to C must be good. For the input of C to be good, the input to B must be good. Therefore, we can be sure that A is good. I1 is also known good, using exactly the same reasoning we did with A. What about D? Is it good or suspect? D has to be good. Do you see why? We got a bad output when D was out of the flow. Therefore, D couldn't be the culprit. So far as suspects, we have B, FC1, and E. Now, what about the lower branch to E? Here we find G as the first component common to good and bad outputs. We already know H is good. We see that G has to have a good input. Otherwise, O3 would be bad. Therefore, I2 and F have to be good. Our suspects now are B, FC1, E, and G. But we may be able to do better than that. What if we changed FC1 to position 2 and output O2 was still bad? We would know that B is good. Something is causing a bad output. and it can't be component B with the flow changer in position 2. Now let's examine the other case. What if we changed FC1 to position 2 and O2 went to good? Well, you know G and E must be good. If one of them were bad, you wouldn't have a good output. FC1 could still have a blockage or an open circuit, and B is still a suspect. But we have cut our suspect list from 4 components to 2. And by the way, if O2 were good and either O1 or O3 were bad, or both, it wouldn't help to change the flow changer. It wouldn't tell you any more than you already knew. For a flow changer to be helpful in localization, it has to feed at least one bad output. Another way to say it is, the flow changer must be upstream of a bad output. Now, let's use this process on a different symptom pattern. Here we have more than one bad output. Begin your analysis by finding those components that are common to all bad outputs. Which ones are they? B is the first one you come to that's common to all bad outputs. Upstream of B, you see both A and input I1 are also common to both bad outputs. So our initial suspect list is I1, A, and B. Now you might say, wait a minute, we haven't tested FC1 in position 2. How do we know it's good? Well, the fact is, it doesn't matter. We have 2 bad outputs when FC1 is in position 1. If we assume that the system has only one malfunction, and we observe that FC1 doesn't feed the bad O1, we can be sure that FC1 will work just fine in position 2. Okay, what do you do next? You look at the components that feed all of the bad outputs and see if any of them have to be good for one of the good outputs to be good. So far, our suspects are I1, A, and B. Since none of these suspects feeds a good output, we can't prove that any of them have to be good to produce the observed symptom pattern. But we may be able to prove one of them good by changing the flow. Let's see. Let's put FC1 in position 2. Did O2 change to good? No, it's still bad. What does this mean? Well, we already knew D wasn't a suspect. The system was bad without it. How about B? We have just learned that B is good. When B does not feed O2, O2 is still bad. So we are left with I1 and A as suspects. But now suppose when we change the flow, O2 becomes good. In this case, we know that something that is not now in the flow was causing O2 to be bad. What suspects are we down to? B and A are the only remaining suspects. Let me say the reason again. B and A were in the flow when O2 was bad. B and the upper output of A are not in the flow when O2 is good. But B and A are still in the flow to bad output O1. It all makes sense when you think about it. I think you are ready to try this yourself on the computer. Now the next time you see me, I'll tell you about isolation. If you turn to the section for Unit 6 in your workbook, you'll find instructions for exercises on the TRS-80 practice unit. Make sure you rewind the tape before removing the cassette from the videotape unit. See you in the next unit.